The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report in the Bristol studios. I'm in the LA studios. We're doing a little coast-to-coast here. ESPN's own Scott Van Pelt. What's happening?
I'm honored to make the leap, man. I appreciate you asking.
I could have sworn you've been on the BS Report before,
Never
but then
before.
I realized
Never before.
that you haven't. Well, the problem is you work 14 hours a day. I mean, I would argue that the child labor laws should apply to Scott Van Pelt to some degree.
It's an astonishing workload. It's ridiculous, but I mean, I think if there's, I genuinely, like you, I really enjoy what I do. I mean, I really enjoy sports. Unlike you, I don't watch a lot of the reality TV because my point is I just enjoy the reality of sports. I mean, look, we can make fun of the Boston thing, but you couldn't make this up, and the drama of it is real, and so luckily I enjoy what I do. But there's a lot on the plate.
I brought you in to basically talk about this whole conference realignment, but I want to talk about your life first. Mm-hmm. So you're taping a show. What time are you waking up, and when do you start preparing for the show?
Well, that's kind of the problem. It never really ends. Like, from the moment that I wake up, and I don't wake up until, I get up in the 10 o'clock Eastern hour and try to get my act together, start waking up, and immediately I'm on the computer to see, has something ridiculous happened overnight? Did Ozzie get the 62-foot boat, or does he just still want it? What has happened in the time that I'm actually asleep, which isn't much? Then there's a call at 11 Eastern. You're on with your radio crew to talk. Russillo's there, my producer Ray, all the guys behind the scenes. We're chopping up what do we want to talk about. Then you're in the car to drive in. I'm here by noon. You're on the air at 1, so you do 1 to 4. Then I got an hour window between 4 and 5 when then SportsCenter's meeting is at 5. Then you get done with that, and you got a little time, try to go to the gym to do something productive. And you try to squeeze some time in to grab
the gym. I wasn't expecting the gym as part of this day.
Well, I'm not jacked, but I just go try to you get over when your age starts with a 4. You got to get on the bike just to make sure you don't just wake up dead someday. So you squeeze in enough time that you can try to get a little cardio in, go eat some food, then you're back in the pod to start writing SportsCenter and watch games throughout the night. You're on from 11 to 12 on a good day. Some days you're on till later. Then you get back home at 1. Then you try to dig in at night to what do we want to talk about tomorrow to send an email out for people to talk about in the morning. And I've just taken you through my day. So it kind of, the preparation for radio and TV, they kind of, one leads to another. So it's beneficial in a way, but it's not beneficial because there's no time in that for any life. It's just all kind of this.
Well, it sounds like you're on some master list that only the higher-ups have at ESPN where they're like, who doesn't have kids?
Yeah.
Let's see. Scott Van Pelt doesn't. All right, so we'll have him do the afternoon show.
He sucks, but we'll just make him do this because he'll do it. Because it's not like he'll do
the 11 sports. Then he doesn't have kids.
Yeah, he didn't have
where's he going?
Yeah, he didn't have a little league game to go to. He doesn't have a life. He's not missing a recital. He'll do it. What else does he have to do? He's just trying to recruit on EA Sports 2011.
Well, I was in Bristol. I passed through like a brief tornado for 4 hours last Friday. And every time I go to Bristol, there's something new there that I haven't seen before. And this time, I could not have been more excited to see the Starbucks. They actually added a Starbucks in Bristol.
And it's a real one that they made the people that work in the CAF go to Starbucks school, which I didn't know is a real. Apparently, it's accredited. You have to learn to make these things. And so, they went to Starbucks school and they're here. Baristas, I guess.
Brilliant idea. Really,
I'm not
really
a coffee
one of the
guy.
best. Well, no, I'm just saying it's nice to have. I remember when they built the cafeteria years and years ago. My buddy Gus, he took me there when I went to visit him, in the late '90s. Took me to the cafeteria, and it seemed like such an obvious idea that it was amazing. They spent, I think, almost 17, 18 years where there was a pizza place down the road and a cafeteria, but there was no place for all the people to go and eat.
Right.
And now that cafeteria has become kind of one of the crucial buildings, it seems in the Bristol campus, right?
It's good. I mean, it's not like a a 5-star dining, but I mean, there's a place to eat, which there's a legendary email that still makes the rounds here that was copied where an employee was at his wit's end that people were literally eating sandwiches out of vending machines, and it was time to get that sorted out, and they did. So, I mean, but look, I think what's interesting, Bill, and when you talk to people that come here, that you know how people view this place. I mean, they've all got a perception of it. And maybe it's negative, maybe it's not. But when you come here and you see it, to have the context of what this place is, when they call it campus, it really is that. I mean, it is a 5, 6, 7, 8 building place that it feels a lot like a campus.
Yeah, and I'm always stunned by the cafeteria, just because I've lived in LA for almost the last 9 years, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 9 years, and when I go back, all of a sudden, there are just these faces to all the emails that I'm exchanging back and forth with all those different people. Like, oh, hey, it's that guy from ESPN the magazine. Oh, hey, it's that guy from the website.
Right.
And I don't think if I actually lived in Bristol, I don't know if I'd get anything done. Because even in the 3 hours that I spent where I was supposed to be doing others, like I ran into you and we talked for 20 minutes in the lobby.
Right.
I ran into a whole bunch of other people in the cafeteria. Oh, I talked to this guy, that guy, that guy. I would think it would just be hard to get through your day because you're constantly running into all these different people from the departments, right?
No, yes and no. Think about it this way. You're here so rarely. I don't know the last time I crossed paths with you, so hey, congrats on Grantland, this and that. And you and I just started as sports fans do, you and I started talking about this conference realignment, and out of that conversation, here I am. But if you were here every day, I mean, for instance, you mentioned Gus. I know he does the podcast with you sometimes. He's a great guy that your listeners know. I don't see Gus nearly as much as I used to because he's he's on mornings, and that's good for his schedule. Yeah. So when I now see Gus, we'll definitely stop and talk about whatever it is in sports that's interesting. But when you see people day in and day out, as much fun as it is to talk about sports for a living, it's still our job. So it's not like you're going to stop every day when you see these people and have the prolonged exchanges because, I got to go do something, so do you.
I ran into Brewski. I got to talk Pats with Brewski for 10 minutes. There was a lot of good stuff. It was fun to pass through. The other thing is you learn things that maybe you can't, that doesn't come across on email. Like with you, I never realized that you dress like an early 90s rapper, which is like your thing.
What was I wearing?
No, I don't. I'm making it up. You should have gone with that. People would have been like, "What, Van Pelt?"
Yeah, exactly. With FUBU and Actually, I do wear
chains,
I wear the Big Daddy Kane rope chain. I do wear the unlaced Chucks because that's kind of the hipster look, and they're comfortable.
All right. So the reason you came on the podcast, well, the main reason, other than just to talk to you, was it seems to me like when I think of like guys who care about college conferences. Which I think is a special breed. Like, I think there are college sports fans or people that love their team, and then there are people that really throw themselves into the conference as a whole and everything about it. And when I listen to your show, and just from what I know about you, it seems like you're just a full-blooded ACC guy.
That's accurate.
Now, the ACC is now adding 2 Big East teams, including Syracuse, to the ACC. To me, it doesn't feel like that's the ACC anymore. Like, at that point, you just rename it. Like, it would be like, I don't know, if we were going to call SportsCenter, but now there are no longer highlights.
Right.
And it was just, SportsCenter became PTI. Like, that's not SportsCenter. Now you're changing the name of the show. How is this still the ACC with Syracuse and Pittsburgh in it?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, there are still holdouts that rue the day that Maryland no longer was the Yankee school in the conference. I mean, for the longest time, Maryland was the northernmost border for the conference, and it was all about Tobacco Road and Carolina and State and Duke and Wake and all that. You go out and you raid the Big East, and you get BC, and you get Virginia Tech, and you get Miami, and to go in to partner with what they did a few years. I say a few years; it's been decades now with Florida State and Georgia Tech. I mean, they've expanded in all these different directions, and largely it was football-driven. And you and I would think, are much more basketball guys than we are football guys. As much as I love football, I grew up with ACC basketball being the end-all, be-all. And I was lucky enough to be in Cole Fieldhouse at Maryland and see basically everybody going back to like David Thompson and NC State and through Jordan and all those guys, to see them come through, and that brands you as what matters to you. And ACC basketball was the best conference for many, many years. Well, now you go out and you get these schools based on football, and it hasn't worked, and nobody goes to the conference championship game, and they suck in the BCS. And now you want to, in a moment of self-preservation, because that's the mode everyone was in, was how do we maintain the viability? They went out and they tried to get some schools that they thought would help them. And you hear all this stuff about footprints in Western PA and upstate New York, and I'm just like, who cares, man? But I guess the fear, Bill, is that if you're worried that Florida State has got its eyes on the SEC, and Clemson probably does the same, even though there are hurdles for each to get to there, you're trying to figure out what you can do to make yourself stronger. And yeah, it makes it stronger, and yeah, it makes it an already great basketball conference even more ridiculous. But is it the ACC? No, I mean, it doesn't feel anything like that. But I have to get over the fact that it's just not going to, and I guess be happy that some semblance of what I remember probably stays intact as a result of strengthening yourself with a couple other schools.
Well, it's interesting. One of my best friends, Joe House, basically had the same life experiences as you. Like, he grew up in Maryland. He went to all the same Maryland games that you went to. Mm-hmm. And I just spent a car ride with him on Saturday talking about this.
What was his reaction?
Same as you. It's a weird thing. It's like guys can't set up guys on other dates. Like mandates where you just like go play golf.
Yeah.
Like, hey, go play golf with my buddy House. It's weird. We don't do that. But if mandates were in, I would set you on a mandate with House.
I'll be happy. You know what? I'll be happy to hang out and play golf with House and talk about the old days and Lefty Zone, all the fun
It would just
stuff.
be it would be Len Bias conversations for 2.5 hours as you traded drives. But House is the same as you. Like, I guess. There's a bunch of different things going on. It's like, when does a conference just not become the conference that we knew? Does that even matter? And then, I just look at this as a guy who doesn't really care about college sports because I went to Holy Cross. I don't really have a favorite team. Like, I dumped BC, and I just kind of watch March Madness and whoever the BCS championship game, and I don't really care. But I really care about the basketball, and I'm confused why they haven't figured this out. It seems like the Big East and the ACC, these two conferences, one should be a football conference, and one should be a basketball conference, right? And that's just what it should be. And yet both of them are trying to dip their feet in both waters, and that seems like that's the problem.
Well, more than anything, what's interesting, and I read this on Twitter, so, I mean, the catchphrase, I guess, is that so it must be true. But I saw something to the effect that Kentucky's revenue was double for football what it is for basketball. Now, think about that. If there's a more basketball school, everybody says where there's a basketball school and a football school. Well, now everybody is both, because football is driving the bus money-wise. So if Kentucky, you couldn't have a more storied tradition other than, I mean, look, Carolina and Duke fans are going to yell, and so is Kansas, etc. But the point is the same. All of those are basketball-first schools, and yet you're talking twice the revenue for football at Kentucky, and that helps you understand that even though the ACC, I would still put up as the best basketball conference in America, and I'm admittedly, biased from my experiences, even though it hasn't been lately, although they've won a bunch of titles. Even though they haven't been great at football, and in football, there's still so much money to be made with what we don't even know what the future holds, because we don't know what's going to happen. Are there going to be these breakaways or 4 super conferences going to form? I don't know. But everyone's so money hungry that there are no alliances. Everybody is interested in preserving their own best interest. That's why, as I described last week on radio, it felt like it was like 2 o'clock in the bar and everyone's just trying to hook up, and they don't even care. They don't care. Like, maybe this guy's bald and heavy. I don't care. Like, he's got a job. Come over here and let's get after it. Like, that's how it felt. Everyone just wanted somebody to make out with.
Who did I make out with last night? Pittsburgh. Oh, no, Pittsburgh.
Exactly.
Oh, I can't believe it.
Exactly. That's how it feels. That's how it felt last week anyway.
That's pretty interesting. I find it hard to believe that football makes that much more money than basketball.
And here, think about this.
I'm sure it's true, but I don't understand how that's possible.
I don't either, because when you think about what the NCAA tournament just got from CBS, I mean, it's billion with a B, and it goes through 2000. I don't even know how long, for like 14 years or something like that. But football generates so much more money, and if they ever really sat down and ran the numbers of what a playoff would run, I'm convinced, and from what I read last week, most of the big wigs involved with this are convinced that it's probably at least twice as much conservatively. So once people figure out, well, what's the mechanism by which we can create a playoff and get that money that we can then justify it. I mean, if 1AA, and I still call it that, can run a playoff, are you telling me that there's the academic load at James Madison and Villanova and
Holy Cross
and Delaware and Holy Cross are less than they are at Alabama and Ohio State and USC? Yeah. No, of course not. And they run a playoff. It's the only sport we have with none. And I'm not going to waste anyone's time with there ought to be one, because we all know there should.
Well, if we end up in a place where there's like 4 or 5 or 6 just mega conferences, ostensibly we're going to have a playoff because those 6 champions will probably be the 6 best teams, right?
You would think.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's interesting to me because I know just obviously from reading you and where your passions lie. This doesn't interest you at all until we get down to till it's like the BCS championship game in March. That's really all that interests you about this?
No, if we had a college football playoffs, I'd be very interested.
Mm-hmm.
I like the week before, when what is it, like 2 weeks before Thanksgiving when we have all the conference championship games?
It's more after that, because
like right after. It's the Friday, Saturday, Sunday right after Thanksgiving. I watch those games. I enjoy those. But then football goes away for 7 weeks.
Right, that's stupid, and that's that's why guys like Delaney from the Big Ten realized that they couldn't afford to have Michigan and Ohio State play the last weekend of November and then give the stage to everybody else. So they go out, get Nebraska. Now they've got enough to have a conference championship game, and it's all that I remember. I have to realize will go away, and that's the weirdest thing about this. Although I grew up an Oriole fan, Bill, and I remember fondly the Orioles and the Brewers playing an unbelievable last weekend of the season series to figure out who's going to win the American League East. And as I'm saying that, people are listening, going, "Wait, the Brewers win the American League East?" Yeah,
right.
They were. And that was a long time ago when I was a kid. And everything changes. All the stadiums that we know go away except for Fenway and Wrigley. And things change. It's just it tends to bum me out. And I find the older I get, the less good I am with any of it.
Yeah, it's the whole nostalgia thing. And sometimes we can get too carried away. But I think in this specific case, I do think this matters. And I think when you think about the ACC, you go all the way back to David Thompson in 1974,
mm-hmm.
and the famous conference game. What was it, double OT or triple OT?
The Maryland-NC State game was...
Yeah, it was double.
I think it was...
Might have been triple.
They played a triple overtime game. I think it might have only been one, Bill. But I know whatever it was, until the Kentucky-Duke game was played in the Spectrum, people would tell you forever that the Maryland State game was the best NCAA basketball game ever played. Maryland was the top 5 team. They didn't win, so they didn't get into the NCAA tournament because there was only one bid then.
And then think about what we grew up with. We're right around the same age.
Yep.
To me, the Big East on Mondays in that 83 to 85 range was the pinnacle of college basketball. Because they had guys who just shouldn't have been in college. Patrick Ewing should have been out of college after a year.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Mullin should have been gone after 2 years. Pearl Washington arguably stayed 2 years too long. I think he would have been a higher pick had he just come out right away. But so on and so on. You had these big guns. And then in the ACC, you had Sampson, you had Jordan. Duke wasn't really Duke yet, but it was just – that's what we grew up with, and that's my framework. And to think of Syracuse, to me, just bleeds Big East.
Oh, without question.
Syracuse, I think of just a charter Big East thing. When BC went to the ACC, it just has never felt right to me. Has that felt right to you to have BC in the ACC? No,
never, ever. And nor Miami, nor Virginia Tech. I mean, I like you, I remember those Monday night games with, Gorman, all those guys. And I remember watching, God, I'm so old, it's sad, but watching Dan Calandrillo from Seton Hall, and they played in a gym where the floor was brown tile, and at one end of the gym there was a curtain because they held, it was like a cafeteria where they held plays and whatnot.
Right.
And that, Chuck Alexinas and Corky Thompson and all those, I remember Syracuse and Manley Fieldhouse because my grandpa, my mom, and my aunt all went there. Syracuse is as Big East as they're as Big East as Carolina is ACC. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're as ingrained in the culture of what it is to be a Big East school as anybody. And the idea, BC's different. They always felt to me kind of like Holy Cross, just a smaller, Jesuit school that didn't feel as massive and strong and as big a brand name. They felt more regional to New England, whereas Syracuse felt and maybe that's because I was in D.C. and the Syracuse-Georgetown rivalry was so epic with Boeheim and John Thompson and what those games represented, and Georgetown going in there in Manley Fieldhouse and closing it down with a win. You knew how much it meant to both of those schools and how much both those schools meant to making the Big East grow from an idea to a titan in the sport. And now, I feel gross about this. I feel like in the ACC, we're pilfering from, you know what I mean? And then the Big East, but that begats the Big East having to go out and go rob Conference USA for Louisville and others. And I don't know. What's the Big East going to do? How do they even survive in football? They got nothing
it's like
anybody
looting.
wants.
It's like looting during a riot, where people are just throwing the chairs through the department store windows and grabbing like computers.
Right. You're like, hey, there's nobody here. You know, I need that. I'm going to take it. That's what our conference did.
You know what really bothers me, and it's bothered me ever since BC left. I really liked the way the Big East was structured. Like, first of all, everybody was in the East. Like, hey, there's a novel concept. We called this the Big East, and the teams are actually in the East. But you had, like, BC was in, you know, the heart of right outside of Boston, heart of Massachusetts, kind of the bad boy of the Big East, had a gambling scandal, guy who was eventually in Goodfellas, like, rigged a couple games.
Nice.
And you had Syracuse up in upstate New York in the middle of nowhere. You had UConn in Connecticut. You have St. John's in New York. You have Villanova in Pennsylvania. Like, it hit every state, basically. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of cool how it worked. And then when BC left it just kind of messed it up. But Providence was in Rhode Island. Like, every state was kind of represented.
I felt like it was as perfect to me as the northern image of what the ACC was, because you could say something similar about that. And what was different with the ACC, and you always felt like, especially being, granted, I have the Maryland colored glasses on, you always felt like everything was ruled by Tobacco Road, as they called it, because the nerve center was down there and remains so. But with the Big East, it felt like there was much more of like a meritocracy, that you had representation all over the place. And, you know, it's the idea that all this happened the day after Dave Gavitt passed. And Bill, the perspective that I got from Gary Williams, who's a friend that was at BC and called Gavitt, you know, one of his closest friends and a true friend, one of the smartest guys he knew. And you read Calhoun saying that the only thing I wish is that I could call him today, the news that Pitt and Syracuse were leaving, just to ask him, what do you think and what should we do? I mean, it's such the irony of the timing is just, maybe it's better that way. And I don't mean to, I'm not making light of a man's passing, but it's almost better you don't live long enough to know that that the real babies that you saw grow up are being, you know, just taken away.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And, you know, the more you look at this story, it just seems like the ACC signed its TV deal a little bit early.
Yeah.
And then
that's what I wondered.
Other teams signed these monster deals, and the ACC's like, oh, so we can renegotiate this deal if we grab more teams. Hey, Syracuse. Hey, Pittsburgh. Come on down.
Right.
And now they can renegotiate.
I wonder about our buddy Skipper up here, John Skipper, who's, you know, and all the execs. Like, I wonder what their job entails, because you've got deals, but then, you know, it's like I said with what about TCU? You say, hey, we're going to join the Big East. This is awesome for us. Well, you signed on to buy a 5-bedroom house. You get there and like 3 bedrooms have just gotten lopped off overnight. Well, wait, no, we had a 5-bedroom house. We got 3. It's going to be good. You'll love it. Better neighborhood you're going to live in. Well, the hell with that. We wanted a 5-bedroom house. No, it's not anymore. So I don't know how it works from the schools like TCU side, and I can't imagine what the executives here are trying to figure out as it relates to what they're paying and what these conferences are going to expect to get paid.
Well, the story I heard, which I am confident is true, is you know who the secret villain of this whole thing is?
Who's that?
Did I tell you this?
What, us?
No, not us.
I normally assume it's us.
No. There was a TV rights advisor for the Big East. Guess who that is? We can play 20 questions. Actually, it'll be boring on a podcast. Paul Tagliabue was the TV rights advisor for the Big East.
Okay.
And apparently ESPN made a large deal offer to Paul Tagliabue through the Big East. And I think it was like $11 million a team or something. Paul Tagliabue, his recommendation to the Big East was that they should pass. And disaster ensued.
When was this?
So, I don't know. In the last year or so, whenever ESPN's negotiations with the Big East fell apart.
Really?
So, it's pretty interesting because Paul Tagliabue was also the reason we just almost had an NFL lockout.
Mm-hmm. Because they kind of gave him the sweetheart deal on the way out.
Yeah, he gave him the old, I want to get out of here with that. Hey, how about this? Sure, I'll sign that. And then, the owners are still mad about it. Like, they're never going to let him in the Hall of Fame. So now he is indirectly, supposedly, from the story I heard, responsible for what happened here to the Big East by not just grabbing the money. I mean, I don't think, do they have any chance of getting 8 figures per team at this point? Seems improbable, right?
Well, no. Now, what they've got now, there's nothing to stand on. There's no ground to stand on. But, as far as the Tagliabue, if he's the villain,
I don't think he's a villain. I just think he made a mistake.
Maybe, but
You know
there are
what I mean?
Bill, there are a lot of people that did. I mean, the film The Road to Perdition, that unbelievable scene when they're in the basement and it's you know, it's Newman and Hanks, and he says, Michael, look around, there are only murderers in this room. You know, and paraphrasing, what the only certainty is that none of us will see heaven. I mean, look, there are only murderers in this room as it relates to what's going on with conferences, and everybody was out for a better deal. And in many ways, what it reminds me of is the guy, you know, Lance Briggs gets a contract with the Bears, gets the first 3 years of it where he's getting the good end of it, then gets to the back three that aren't as good and says, I need a new deal. And it feels like conferences did the same thing. You know, the Big 12 a year ago told Texas, listen, you're the prettiest girl in the room. We just want to sit with you at the lunch table. And that's what Baylor and Iowa State all said. We don't care that we don't get as much money. We just want to hang out. And a year later, A&M goes, when we look in the mirror, we think we're as pretty as you, even though they're not. So what do? They bail to the SEC, even though they swore their allegiance to the Big 12 a year ago. There are only murderers in this room.
I feel slightly vindicated about my decision to kind of phase away from college sports because I just feel like it's corrupt and it's not governed. And you know, I guess the flip side of that would be like, well, why do you follow boxing? There's no more corrupt, ungoverned sport than boxing, which I have no defense for. But it's, you know, when you read like something like Taylor Branch's big piece that he had in the Atlantic about.
How good was that?
It was great about the fact. And you know what else was good? Seth Davis's rebuttal, I thought, made some good points too. It was one of those, I don't really like rebuttals for the most part, but I thought he made some good points. Like, you can't say college athletes are getting nothing because college costs $220,000 a year now if you're going to a big school. So
that's fair. That's
a lot of money, and you get a lot of free stuff. So it's not like, you know, I think it's offensive to use the word slaves in general for this stuff, but especially with if you're getting free education for 4 years, and also if you're really good, you leave anyway early and you get paid. You know, and we've made such a big deal over the last few years about how in basketball, people should stay in college for 2 years, and you do learn some good stuff, and you learn, you know, how to fit into a team structure and how to handle your business, and you're not just thrown to the wolves in the NBA. Like, I feel like LeBron James's career would have been a lot different had he been to college for 2 years. Same thing for Dwight Howard.
I think that more than anything, what would be nice for these guys to learn, and it would be a harsh lesson, is that so many of these guys arrive anointed as stars that just aren't.
Yeah.
That just aren't. And so,
Harrison Barnes.
Well, I think he'll be a top.
No, but I'm saying, like, he got kicked in the teeth there in November. I think it made him better. I think that getting that much heat that early kind of pushed him to a better place.
I'll buy that to a degree. I think you come from the middle of Iowa where you're going to be better than everybody. I mean, he was great, and then you get to Carolina, and all of a sudden he was a first-team All-American before he'd even played a second in college, and I think
that wasn't fair.
He felt a ton of pressure there, but yeah, you assimilate, you find out a million things. I think there's an incredible value just from my college experience of just finding out that you have a lot in common with people that you might not think you would. And so beyond what you learn in the classroom, there's so much of a benefit to spend some time on campus. But it's just also nice for the 5-star guy who thinks that he's lottery. No, you're not. Like Henson at Carolina learned that. Yeah, you got really long arms and you're bouncy, but what are you? Are you another Brendan Wright? I mean, we've seen how that went in the NBA. Stick around for another year, maybe win a title, and maybe get your game a little better. That's a completely separate conversation, but I'd love to see that come out of the NBA, that we got 2 years out of it, because selfishly for me in college, going back to what we talked about, I saw Len Bias play at Maryland for 4 straight years when I was there. I got to see 4 years of Leonard Bias. You know how much I get to see now? A year. Because he would have made that shot as a freshman against UT Chattanooga in the tournament, and that would have been enough for him to leave, because he would have gone, yeah, look how high I jumped and I made that shot. I'm leaving. And he would have gotten drafted. Now.
Well, and then a lot of those guys in the 80s, I mean, you could argue it really hurt them. I think it completely hurt Ralph Sampson. He basically wasted at least 3 years in college, and you look at how short his NBA career was, he got hurt. Mm-hmm. But those are 3 years that he could have been. The Lakers had a deal, I think, after his first or second year in college where they would have traded Kareem. And it was the Worthy draft. They would end up with Sampson and Worthy.
Who do you think
in that draft?
Who do you think is a better poster child of how different the game was then? That Ewing stayed as long as he did, or that Sampson at 7'4" with that skill set stayed 4 years at Virginia?
Sampson, because the Celtics knew that they were going to get him with the first pick in 1981, the year that they traded down and ended up with McHale Parrish. And they were begging him to come out. Red Auerbach, I think he ultimately stayed, and the parents were like, we want Ralph to get his degree. And Red Auerbach had some sarcastic Red Auerbach quote like, what is he going to be, a doctor?
Right.
Like, he should come out now.
Right.
And it's true. He should have. He could have played with Larry Bird and Tiny Archibald and been in the best possible situation for himself and kind of overthought it. I think Ewing should have come out too. I don't know what he gained staying in college for 4 years. It's certainly like you look at some of the missteps that he made in his personal life during his NBA career, like the Gold Club trial and stuff like that. I don't know if the 4 years really helped him that much.
Right.
Chris Mullin, same thing, 4 years and ended up with a drinking problem. So I just think like 2 years seems like enough.
I would agree, and we're on opposite sides of this. Although I've really, especially last year with the NBA, I really got as more of a sweet tooth than I've had in a long time for the league.
Oh yeah,
for the league last year. I think then you get, and I say you like you're on the NBA side, but NBA fans get a little bit more polished product if you get 2 years out of it. And college fans, you get 2 years out of it, which is what. Look, everybody's so excited about the college season this year because we're going to see Henson stay for another year at Carolina. Barnes stays for another year at Carolina. Sullinger stays for another year at Ohio State. None of these guys are ready to contribute in the league, really. But they'll be potentially part of a great college season, and then fine, then go to the league. Then maybe you're a little bit better prepared to be the ninth guy on the rotation.
Well, and this is where the lockout actually, probably the only productive thing about this entire lockout was it scared some of these guys into coming back for another year. And
all of them. Look at the kid
Irving
right
came out.
Say again?
Irving was the only one who came out, right?
Yeah, and he
Out of
never
the big
goes
guys?
right, but he never goes one if the kid was Wright from not Wright, the guy at Baylor. I'm blanking.
Perry Jones.
Perry Jones, the big kid at Baylor. If he comes out, if Sullinger comes out, if Barnes comes out, there's probably three more guys. Irving would have been top five, but there's no way in the world that a guy that small goes one unless there's just no other better option that's big.
And this is why this is such an intriguing college hoop season. I think college hoops is going to have a real impact this year because we're definitely going to miss NBA games. So
what do you think? How long?
Minimum mid-February.
Really?
Oh yeah.
See, I've become more hopeful that the holiday time they sort it out, and by the start of the year we're good. But I'm taking a real optimistic view because everybody I talk to says the same thing you do.
Well, and it's not even like a doomsday thing. Like they're so far apart, and what the owners want to do with their system is reinvent it. You know, it's like a little bit like what happened in the NHL. The NHL was much more severe because the NHL was a situation where they were just going to hold out for however many seasons it took to fix it.
Think about
and there
that.
were real issues in the NHL.
Think about it. They missed a year, man. They missed it. Imagine any other sport that can you even imagine missing a year of anything?
No. They had a blue collar sport that everybody was paying white collar prices for, and they had to fix that. The NBA, you know, I'm more on the player side than the owner side in this one because basically the owners are looking for protection from being idiots.
Yeah,
they can't help themselves.
Your tweets that one day made that pretty clear.
Well, they can't help themselves, and they need help, and they want help, and they want to be stopped from giving out terrible. I did a thing for Grantland that went up Tuesday with Jonathan Abrams where there might be an amnesty clause. The big rumor is that there's an amnesty clause in whatever labor deal they come up with.
Really?
So every team will be able to write off one contract that they had. They'd still have to pay them, but that figure wouldn't count against the salary cap. So we try to figure out for each team who that person would be that they would get rid of to get them off the cap. There were 13 guys that we listed that were signed or extended last summer that teams would use now for amnesty. That's how dumb these teams are.
Right.
They literally can't stop giving out stupid deals.
Well, but
and they want protection from themselves. Basically.
To bring this back full circle to what started our entire conversation about conferences getting, realigned, BB, the conference commissioner of the Big 12, just got extended by the people that fired him, man. Here's the thing in sports. Does it ever surprise you when people do dumb stuff? Because all they do, because dumb stuff just happens on the regular. And that's why great organizations that don't have that many missteps are great organizations because they're an anomaly. It seems like there's so many that are mired in mediocrity at the management level that's how people like this, the 13 guys you mentioned, get extended. Yeah, and there's a real issue. I really do think that it's going to end up with at least two teams getting contracted because when you just look at it, because the owners paid $2.1 billion in salaries last year, and I think they made something like $4.1 billion total. So the players got 57% of that, and everybody's talking about these splits where the players get 57%. Oh, that's got to come down to 50. It's not even about the splits. It's about what they're paying the players in salary every year. Right.
And they want to get to like 1.6, 1.7 billion. And the players are like, no, we're not coming down further than this point. So it's a stalemate, basically. The way to get to there is to eliminate 30 jobs and go to 28 teams and say, all right, well, we eliminated 30 jobs. Now you'll have more money because you have less players. And that's where this ends up, I think. I think they get rid of 2.
Memphis?
No, I don't think it'll be Memphis. I think they'll merge. And, you have 2 situations right now where you have New Orleans that doesn't have an owner. So obviously they could be contracted, or you could take a team like Indiana and you merge Indiana and New Orleans and you give the Indiana owner the New Orleans franchise in New Orleans and they merge those teams. And you could basically take Sacramento and merge them with anybody. Their owners can't pay the bills anyway.
I understand that. I'm glad to hear Memphis not mentioned, because last year when you heard cities mentioned, that they were the first one, and I'm thinking after last year's playoff run, which was such a blast to watch, because that town has supported them, I think, as well as you could ask them to be supported. The other ones you say make way more sense.
Well, and then you have a city like Milwaukee is one of the most obvious candidates, but they're owned by a U.S. senator.
Right.
You can't tell a U.S. senator we're contracting your team. The other chip they have is Chicago, because I still haven't heard anybody say that there's no chance Chicago could have a second NBA team in about a year. And you could merge 2 of these teams and move them to Chicago. Like, for instance, you could take Charlotte, owned by Michael Jordan. You could merge them with Milwaukee, and you move them into Chicago as the second team with Jordan as the owner. Now you've taken 2 $270 million NBA teams, and you've turned them into a $700 million franchise. That's smart business.
Why doesn't Stern just bring you into the room and let you just get a big whiteboard and just start writing?
I'm waiting. I'm on call. I'm ready to solve this lockout, because the problem is they're just trying to fix the current deal they have, and this situation requires actually thinking outside the box and saying, that old deal doesn't work anymore. What do we do? How do we bring in new money? How many teams should we have? There are discussions that they're not having yet that they should be having, in my opinion. And it should be a 28-team league. What do we need 30 teams for?
We don't. But, I mean, look, that was the whole idea with the NHL. It was just, hey, this is awesome. We should have more of everything, because it would make so much sense to go to Atlanta, because we just forgot the Flames ever existed. And Phoenix will be great, because there's people who like to do fun stuff. No, they don't.
Right.
No, they don't. They just want to stand around and look at each other and be more attractive than the next guy and be in debt.
Well, and the major flaw in their argument is because they're talking about, well, we need revenue sharing, and that's got to be part of this, and we'll come up with a deal first, then we'll have revenue sharing. The problem with revenue sharing is in the NFL you can do it, because you need 32 teams in the markets. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter who's playing where, because it's all about the TV money. That's the only thing that matters. Mm-hmm. In the NBA, it's not about the TV money. It's also about the attendance and the 41 home games a year you have to sell, the money you make for that. And the Lakers and Chicago and the Knicks bring in so much more ticket money than everybody else that, if I'm Jerry Buss, I don't think it's my job to pay for basketball in Indiana. It's not my fault that Indiana is in a good basketball market. Why should I cut a $10 million check to Indiana? You shouldn't. So, they have to decide whether Indiana, Milwaukee, Charlotte, Minnesota, Sacramento, whether these markets should actually have basketball. And, like Oklahoma City is another one, but they're doing great because they have Kevin Durant. Exactly. So they've created a situation where if you're Cleveland or you're Oklahoma City and you have Kevin Durant or LeBron James, it's awesome. Hey, we're selling out. But then you see what happens when it flips, like last year in Cleveland, and Antoine Jameson is your best guy.
Right.
That's when you get into trouble.
That's a fair point.
So,
can I ask you a question about fantasy sports?
Please.
Because you mentioned the NFL, and it's obviously the most popular league we have in the country.
Absolutely.
And it's not close. I watch the Red Zone channel on Sundays. My man Scott Hansen just breaking things down, double box, triple box, this and that. Do you think in the future that the overwhelming popularity, especially with young people that have grown up only knowing fantasy sports, that the popularity of fantasy football will impact the popularity of actual teams in terms of gates and whatever else? And what I'm getting at is it's fascinating to me to talk to people where I say, who do you root for, your team or your team? And by that, I mean, I grew up a Redskin fan. I don't have a fantasy team. But Denny Hamlin was in here. He's a driver. He's a big Redskin fan, or he claimed to be. And I said, if Romo's on your fantasy team, throws a touchdown pass that beats the Redskins, but your fantasy team wins, are you happy or are you sad? He's like, oh, I'm happy. I said, well, you're not a Redskin fan.
Yeah, you're not a Redskins fan.
But do you think that will negatively impact the NFL? Because I don't think that it necessarily will, but I wonder if people won't just become fans that want to watch the Red Zone channel to see who scores so that they know who's winning on their fantasy team.
My counter argument to that would be that I think it's been the case for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. Like, I really do. I think the media in a mainstream way has embraced fantasy football more, and we talk about it. We mention it during SportsCenter, but I don't really feel like the number of people playing fantasy football has increased that much. Like maybe it doubled, but it's not like it's 10-tupled or anything. And
is that a number?
Well, it might be. But I just feel like if you're rooting for your fantasy team over your real team, then as you said, you're not a real fan of that team.
But I'm amazed at how many people respond because whether it's a financial deal or whether it's just you want to have the bragging rights of your buddy and feel like you've got fans just want to feel intellectually superior to the other fan and think that their opinion's more valid and more relevant in the grand scheme. And that's one way to prove it, even though I think it's completely arbitrary, but that's another discussion for another day, I suppose. But
I thought you were going in a different direction because for me, the fan experience, and you throw in fantasy football, and I noticed at the Pats game, the Pats and the Bills are playing. The Pats are losing. That's my team. But there's also 8 games going on that are all close, and I'm just trying to digest everything. I actually thought I was going to have a seizure at one point. There's so much going on.
Sunday's 1 o'clock window was the best we've had so far this year.
Oh, my God. I think every game was close at one point. But I think people are now hitting a point with and this is why I think the owners were so concerned heading into this lockout, that they solved. I think they're worried about attendance because it's more fun to stay home and watch all these games at once on your nice TV. And I've made this point a million times, but they're going to have to figure out a way to customize the stadium experience a little bit more so that you can follow other games as you're at the game you're at. Because it's boring to just sit there during those 5-minute TV timeouts when you could be home watching 8 TVs at once.
It's a brutal fan experience to go to an NFL game because
it's terrible. It's not fun, and
people are hammered, and that's a whole other issue. But I mean, if you're totally invested, and I don't care. And look, the big taboo is the gambling aspect, and that's just as big a deal as the fantasy. And if you got all this action on the 1 o'clocks and you're trying to figure out you got this under tied to that over tied to this underdog in a money line deal, you got to be locked into Hansen or your 6 sets or whatever it is. And I wonder if the incredible popularity and all the different tentacles of it are just so much more digestible if you're at home on your couch than they are if you're sitting even in great seats in Gillette.
Well, think about this. The 2 most popular things right now are football and March Madness. Mm-hmm. Those are the 2 water cooler sports that we have, unless Tiger Woods is in the Masters or whatever's going on. And those are both gambling. Those are both things where you can interject yourself and you have your own personal interest that goes beyond just the team that you root for. March Madness, I filled out a bracket. I want to win my bracket. Fantasy football, I pick my team. I want my team to win. And I care more about those sports than I normally would if I was just – and that's why I think like with the NBA playoffs, why they've made such a mistake not, just guaranteeing the 14 playoff teams, then having the 16-team playoff for the last 2 spots and make it in a way that we could have brackets for the NBA playoffs. Try to pick who's going to win, then they're going to play here, who got more points. That's the kind of stuff they got to start thinking about because that's our society.
That's how we operate. I totally agree, and that's why baseball, to me, it's sacrilege to say, or heresy, or however you want to put it. I wonder if baseball is and by our I mean mine and yours, generation's boxing and horse racing.
I couldn't agree more, and I'll tell you another thing. I wrote a AL MVP column 3 weeks ago. I've been writing my column since 1997, going back to my old website, TSPN. It's the first time I've ever gotten emails from people saying, don't write about baseball, nobody cares. I've never, ever gotten those emails before.
I have 3 hours of radio to talk about. We had Matt Kemp on Tuesday, and I think this guy's pursuing a triple crown, a 40-40 season potentially in the MVP. And it was interesting. I asked him, what of those which of those would be more meaningful if you could only have one? And he said 40-40, and I thought, I can't believe that triple crown wouldn't be the answer. He's the guy doing it. But just the idea that a guy in Los Angeles can be pursuing a triple crown and be literally 2 great games away from having a real shot at it. And, Bill, nobody knows. No one knows that he's doing it. And it's our fault at ESPN because if it was a Red Sox or a Yankee, SportsCenter would have melted by this point. We would have been so obsessed by it. But the Dodgers have been off the grid because they haven't had a season that's anything good has happened. And yet they could win the MVP and they could win the Cy Young with Kershaw and Kemp. And this guy could have a triple crown, and it just doesn't resonate at all. And that's astonishing to me.
Baseball has become a sport where you follow your team, and that's it. And you might follow the other 2 rivals of your team.
Maybe.
And unless you're in like a creepy fantasy league like the one I'm in, like we're AL only with minor leaguers and weird people coming up. Yeah, for the most part, people are like, if you're a Mets fan, like my buddy Gus, he watches the Mets.
And
you know what? The Mets every night. That's his team.
God bless him, because there's so few people anymore, Bill, that I think that are that way. Because I think that whether it's your fantasy team or other people, because baseball, the pace of it, the length of the game, the length of the season, people just tap out and they give up. Look, I grew up on the Orioles. I mean, when I was a kid, it was them and the Yankees, and I saw them win a World Series when I was in high school, and they don't matter, and I don't know when they'll ever matter again. But I still am on the fringe invested, but I don't sit down and watch these guys play every day. I don't know their rotation, and I host SportsCenter. That's embarrassing.
Well, it's so long. It's just a long commitment. I've talked about this ad nauseum, but it's a 4-hour commitment. It's like, what else in your life is 4 hours? Name anything that lasts 4 hours in your life.
A football. If the Patriot-Bill game lasted 6, you wouldn't have complained.
No, but football's 3 and you're out.
I understand, but my point is, had it been 6, you wouldn't have cared. You'd have stayed with it. As good as that was Sunday?
I'd care if it was every night. If it was 162 games of 6 hours, I'd care.
I understand that. I think that when football ends, it's like, when's the next game start? When baseball, in the middle of it, it's like, when's it going to end?
I'd be real interested to see what happens, because eventually they're going to kill the goose and they're going to have football on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday night. So
we already do
every night.
We already do.
Well, I mean for NFL, it'll be they're just going to 10 years from now they're just going to go overboard and they're going to decide every night we'll make money and I think at some point there's going to be a burnout factor. I really do. And last year, do you remember the game when there was the Philadelphia game and they got postponed until Tuesday? Mm-hmm. And we had to go, I think we went Thursday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I felt like there was real burnout for that Tuesday game.
There might, I guess, but then again, you're talking to a guy that when there's 2 MAC schools that are playing on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, because when you're Kent and Toledo and the ESPN says, hey, would you guys mind playing at noon on Wednesday? They're like, yeah. I'm there watching because it's a game, and because games interest me, I'll watch them. But again, when you create false scarcity. It's like the line outside a club. There's no one in the club, but you make people wait in line.
True.
The more you make people feel like they have to wait until Sunday to get their NFL, the smarter it is. And I think you're right that we get to that last weekend of the year where we play a couple of Saturday games or whatever. That's fine, but you need to create a false sense of scarcity to make people really, really go bananas for the times they can't see it.
That would be a good name for a website, false scarcity.
I like it.
2 quick questions, and then you have to go because you have to
host the next
led by the ESPN guys again. Number 1, what college basketball team, you can't count Maryland, are you most excited about this year?
Carolina. I want to see what they are. I mean, they've got an unbelievable recruiting class. The fact that Zeller and Henson and Barnes all stayed. Kendall Marshall, their point guard's not great. He can't shoot at all, but he figured it out in the second half of the season when they got much better. I just want to see what all of them look like together. I'm not saying they're as much of a lock to win it as they were the year that they had Hansborough and Lawson and all those dudes, and they just went to got to March Madness and beat the crap out of everybody. But Carolina, I want to see what they're about, and they play Kentucky early, and that's going to be nuts.
What sport will benefit more from the NBA lockout, college basketball or hockey?
I think college basketball for sure, because people that are jonesing for hoop aren't going to turn to hockey. They're going to turn to college basketball to see the next wave of guys that will be entertaining them in Chicago and New York and LA and Miami a year from now. Hockey fans are incredibly passionate, and I appreciate it, but it seems to me that in New York City, if it's 8 million people, maybe there's 100,000 that love hockey, but they are insane for it. And if there's 8 million people in New York, there's 4 million that like football. I think every big city, every great sports city's got a pocket of incredibly passionate hockey fans, but they don't number as many as hoop. And I think off the bounce the NBA got last year, and the fact that there are all these young kids that people know their names returning to college, we won't have to learn who's the new John Wall this year. We already know. I would think college basketball benefit in a huge way.
I think I agree. Last question.
Yep.
Guys who are on the air, guys who are writers, they develop their guys. The guys in the sports world that they have a good relationship with. Mm-hmm. Yours was Tiger Woods.
Yep.
And then the last 2 years, was it been 2 years? 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Last 2 years, his life totally falls apart. He becomes a punchline to some degree. He can't get his career back. He loses his mojo. How weird was this for you?
It was. I'm divorced from it mostly. I mean, like I'm not involved, I'm not invested. You know, I've been around the guy socially some. I knew him some. We had a great professional relationship where we were friendly but not friends, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a lot of people like that. It's good to be friendly with him, but I know what's what. I mean, it's not like he's calling me up going, hey, you know, we're getting a plane and the boys are going to Vegas. I mean, that's not happening.
Right.
And yet I had a front row seat to just an unbelievable ride and had some pretty good access for it. So was it weird? Sure. Just because the thing about him was that as much as any athlete, he was a lock. He was a certainty. You knew what you were going to get from him. You know, we're still waiting to see when LeBron will come through in a fourth quarter in a game that, you know, matters in the NBA Finals. With LeBron with Tiger in the final round of a major, it was an ironclad lock in a sport where if you are able to close 20%, you're doing great. So it's been strange to see all of that wither away and to see the aura of what he was be totally, and I mean totally, diminished. So I'll say this, he's still the only guy that people are really captivated by. And I'm over at the British Open, and I just ask an honest question on Twitter. You know, you got Rory McIlroy, you got this, you got that. Are you interested? And people largely say no. He's the one guy in that sport that can captivate the attention of people. And if your follow is, will he get it again? I haven't got a clue. I would guess he'll resemble something that we recall eventually. But, you know, is he ever going to be the superhero from 2000 that's, you know, laying waste to every record? No, I don't think that's reasonable to think we'll see that again. But I tell you, it was odd, man. I remember vividly the day he drove into a tree and think, this doesn't smell right. And, you know, 2 years later, he hasn't won since.
I don't think physically he's going to be the same because the injuries that he's had are not good injuries if you're a golfer.
That's true.
And I think as common people, we forget sometimes that once your body goes, it doesn't come back, you know. If he can't push off his knee like he used to, it's going to affect how he swings a golf club, and there's no getting around that. Mentally, obviously not the same. He's getting a little older.
That's a bigger deal to me, Bill, than the physical. You're right. If your left knee is a mess, that's a problem. But the thing he did, he used to jam dudes up. He messed with their airspace more than anybody in that sport. He would do passive-aggressive stuff where he'd stand in their line when they were putting, where they just always had to see him. He'd stand near them on the tee box. He'd make them feel his presence to the degree you could in a sport where there's no defense. And now guys just look at him and there's no fear, man. They don't know. Roy McIlroy, if he gets out there in a major with him face-to-face, he's not going to be afraid of him.
Right. And Tiger fed off that.
100%. And he would always deny it. It was funny. I would always just laugh at him because I'd always try to get him to come along for the ride, and he'd always soft sell it. And then you'd stop rolling tape. He'd be like, you're so full of crap. You know? And he'd be like, well, what am I going to be, admit it? You know? And I'm like, yeah, everyone knows what it is. But, you know, that what it was and what it is, you know, they're miles apart now.
It's, you know, the NBA TV showed a Magic, the year that the Magic beat the Bulls when Jordan came back from baseball, and it just was never totally...
45, right? The 45 year?
Yeah, he was wearing 45. Nick Anderson stripped him for the game winner. And then in Game 6, he sucked. He was bad. He cost them that game. And it was the only time he's been beaten in a playoff series from 1991 on. And you watch it, and he just doesn't seem right.
Right.
And now you watch it in retrospect going, all right, well, I know that he's going to come back that next year, and they're going to go 7-2-10. He's going to be Jordan again. Tiger just seems trapped in that 95 Orlando-Chicago mode. He can't get out of it.
That's such a great analogy. And if for years, the safest bet on the table would have been to put all your money on will he pass Jack or whatever the question would be. Will he ultimately be remembered as the greatest player of all time? And now, look, we have the benefit of knowing how the Jordan story ended. It might have gone on a chapter or two too long, but we know that there was some real good play after that. You know, I don't know where the chapter starts that has Tiger winning again. I'll just say one thing, and this is real golfy, and if it's boring, please chop it out of this. The fact that Joe LaCava, all right, he's a caddy that caddied for years for Tiger Woods. The fact that guy who he left Fred Couples this year and caddied for a guy named Dustin Johnson, young player, he's been in the majors, close, hasn't broken through yet. He left Dustin Johnson to go with Tiger Woods starting whenever Tiger plays again. The fact that a veteran caddy would leave a young guy in his 20s that's going to make $3 million a year to go to Tiger, to me, tells me LaCava thinks that Tiger will come back and be great again. Because why would you leave a job where you knew what you were going to make for what was behind door number 3, unless you thought what was behind door number 3 is maybe Tiger Woods turns into Superman again? So for whatever
I like
that's worth, it's very golfy, but that's one inkling I get that maybe the thought is he'll get something back sometime soon.
When you do the golf stuff, do you have to practice toning down your voice and seem very calm? Like
I just, you know what?
Scott Van Pelt.
I think I can just be myself, I think you know your audience, you realize who you're talking to, and, I just, maybe there's less hip-hop references than there might be over a SportsCenter hoop highlight, because you're talking to, but I'd like to think if I'm anything, man, look, you can think I'm good or you can think I'm not, whatever. If nothing else, I'm just me. And if as long as you're authentic, you know what I mean, then you don't have to worry about it. People are going to like you or they're not. But
so you don't study Jim Nantz game tapes, trying to figure out exactly how to hit that right decibel?
Hello, friends. No, I'll leave the hello, friends to him and, try to come up with my own whatever it is.
All right, since you carry a lot of golf sway, I do think you should take my idea that, I don't know if you've heard this, but I have an idea that the PGA Championship, which is the Australian Open ugly sister of the 4 golf majors, nobody really likes the PGA Championship. I mean, if you ask people like who won in 2003, I don't think people could tell you.
That's true.
I think the players should be forced to carry their own bags. No caddies for the PGA tournament.
I've seen
That's the wrinkle.
I've seen you run this out there.
You're not in on this?
Well, I mean, here's the sad thing for the PGA Championship is that like this year, no one knew who Keegan Bradley
Nobody.
Or Jason Duffner was. But if you watched it, it was insane. I mean, it ended up in a playoff, and it was compelling theater. And the PGA Championship tends to get a really entertaining event, and it just totally gets lost in the shuffle because football has started, even though it's preseason, and people can't be bothered to pay attention to the fourth one. The idea that guys should have to loop their own bags, how does that make it any more fun than
it's endurance, it's stamina. You're having a physical component. Like,
are you going to put bricks in the bag, and if you've got a 2-stroke lead, you got to carry more bricks? I mean, how much do you want to handicap? Is it like jockeys at the Kentucky Derby?
You have to have a 25-pound golf bag. What is the difference in the PGA Championship and the U.S. Open? I think if you ask the casual average sports fan, they wouldn't understand why we have both. And I know why we have both, but it feels like we're okay with the U.S. Open.
Well, I mean, it's symmetry. We've got 4. I mean, we've got the Masters, which is unique. We've got our Open. We've got their Open, and by that I mean the British. And then we've got the last one.
We're good with those 3. So we need a 4th one. It needs to be a wild card.
Well, then, so what good's the Australian Open other than that it's nice weather and we turn it on and we're reminded that it's sunny somewhere? What good's the
Exactly. Who won the 2007 Australian Open?
Not Joe Willie Sunga, but he probably beat somebody good somewhere along the way.
Nobody knows. Nobody cares. Nobody follows. We have to start messing around with those 2 tournaments
to make them more relevant.
Yeah, when I'm the czar of sports, I'm gonna put you in charge of college basketball realignment.
Thank you.
One of the things I do. Scott Van Pelt, we can hear you on the Scott Van Pelt Radio Show on ESPN Radio 1 to 4. That is also available in podcast form. We can see you on SportsCenter. What are your exact SportsCenter nights?
I don't know. I'm just here. I'm doing the ABC stuff on college football on Saturdays as well. I think their goal for me, Bill, is for me to be here every single day doing something, and maybe Sundays I'll just be manning the omelet station at the Calf.
I'm coming back for that. I want to have you cook me an omelet. And then you don't have golf now until when? April?
Not until the Masters. And incidentally, I don't do the PGA Championship because we don't have any of the rounds. And at ESPN, if we don't have any of the rounds, we just kind of ignore it.
Yeah, it's sight unseen. I might come to the Masters this year. I think I'm going to take my dad.
Have you ever been?
I have not, and I feel like I should go.
All right, I don't know if we're up against it time wise or what, but let me just tell you this: I have never met one person that's a sports fan that has ever gone to Augusta National and not walked away completely blown away. There are many things in sports when you go will fall short of what you think. You create an expectation that cannot be met. Nobody ever leaves the Masters and just doesn't say, I can't believe how much more beautiful it was. I can't believe how much different it was than I imagined it. If your dad likes golf at all, you have to do that.
He does.
Well, then bring him in and I'll meet you under the oak tree.
You don't have that list of things that you know you're going to enjoy, but you don't want to do it yet. It's like not opening that last bottle of wine.
I got it.
Saving it for like for me, it's The Big Lebowski. I've still never seen it. I've just been saving it. And
really?
I don't know when the right time's going to be, but I know when I see it, I'm going to enjoy it. But I'm just saving it. It's that last bottle of wine on my DVD shelf.
Well,
the Masters is like that for sports for me.
Well, the dude abides, and you should go to Augusta National and see it. It's that good.
All right, SVP, stop working so hard. Talk to you soon.
I appreciate you asking, Bill. I'll do it anytime.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.